As an entrepreneur, marketing has always been a challenge for me ever since I started my business. I have some success as I trial and error in some areas, but some areas I try to read books and learn a little more. Lucky for you, today you get to watch an interview with someone that can help you tremendously with her 3-word rebellion. I can think back to writing emails with 6, 7 sentences worth of information describing what I'm offering. And then I think, why would someone read all of that? I need to find a way to make it clear and concise. Today's guest will do just that. She's from Seattle, Washington. She's been on that entrepreneur show. Get ready for a good one. And allow me to now bring on Dr. Michelle Mazur. Michelle, it's great to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Vincent. I am so excited for this conversation. I love book talk.
Would you mind now taking the time to introduce yourself a little more to our audience before we dive into book talk?
Sure. I am Dr. Michelle Mazur. I'm the CEO of Communication Rebel, which is a company that works on the messaging and the messaging strategy for your business. And the reason why messaging is so important, I see so many times, especially with online business owners, that they go from like, oh, I have this great offer to, oh, I have to market this. So I take all these marketing classes and then I don't know what to say in the marketing. I don't know what to put in the email or to say on a podcast or to put in a blog post. And they stumble and their marketing efforts fall flat because they don't have a message. They don't know how to communicate the value of the work they do in a way that gets the attention of your right fit clients.
Michelle, I'm excited to learn more about this book. Was this book first or was the business first?
So the business was definitely first because I proved the concepts that I talk about in the 3-word rebellion within the business. So pretty much like I had this idea. Like I was like, "Oh, I'm seeing this super cool pattern between social movements and my favorite entrepreneurs being really good at summarizing like what the change they're creating is all about." So whether that was Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, or it was Simon Sinek and Start With Why, Adam Grant, Think Again, Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, they all do similar things. And I was like, well, that's really interesting that they can communicate the value, the change they create so well. And I was like, I wonder if I took questions from social movement theories about like, oh, how are you rebelling? Like, what are you rebelling against? What's the change that you want to create? And just had my clients like dump their thoughts into that, if I could create that really succinct message with them. And it worked. So before it was a book, I experimented with my clients. I also rolled it out as a webinar just to see like, are people going to be interested in this? Like if I put this out there, are they interested? And pretty much I positioned the webinar with like, hey, I've come up with this idea. I've been testing it behind the scenes. It's all about creating this succinct message that gets you known for your work. Would you be interested in spending 60 minutes with me and hearing about it and then giving me any feedback you have? And that is really like that was such an essential part before actually creating the book, because it helped me also define like, how do I talk about the 3-word rebellion? Because I had this like, ooh, this is like a super catchy idea, but then you actually have to communicate that idea. Like once you get people's attention, you've got to figure out what to do with it. So doing those workshops, working with my clients were all important proving grounds before I wrote the book.
Very well said. For everyone watching today, you always have to constantly recraft your pitch, recraft what you're offering because times are changing and every client is different. Michelle, how long has this book been available?
It came out in February of 2019, so nearly 2.5 years. And right now I'm working on a revised and expanded version of it because I've learned more stuff in that time. Because I mean, I wrote the book probably over 3 years ago because it takes a while to get things out into the world once you've written it. So yeah, I'm in that process of revising, expanding it, thinking about doing an audio book for it as well.
The audiobook is on my list too. I'm hoping to get that out before the summer's end. But you mentioned this book's been out for about 2.5 years. What led you to becoming a published author?
It's really funny because I have 2 other books that came out before this one. And when I came up with this idea for the three-word rebellion, I mean, I was that type, I was like, "I am never writing another book. They're a lot of work. It's a lot of thinking. I don't have time for that." And I remember having a conversation about my husband about the three-word rebellion, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna write a book." And he's like, "Of course you are." He's like, "Because you are an author." And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I also think with my academic background, like writing a dissertation, that is like writing a book, but with a lot more original research. Um,
Very good.
so I was already kind of predisposed to it, and I thought it was a good way to get that the messaging work out to more people, because I can't work with everyone one on one who needs help with communicating the value of their business and their marketing and copy and sales. So I was like, all right, I'll just give you the book and walk you through the process. And that's why I really created it.
Amazing answer. I've read the reviews. I've seen your work. I know there's a lot of value there. Would you mind now, please, extending two pieces of advice to our fellow community of writers?
So advice piece number one is that if you have already been creating content around your book idea, do not start with a blank Google document. Take the content that is relevant and pull it in, and then you can decide, like, how do I want to organize this? How can I add to it to really flesh out the concepts here, to take it from like a blog or a podcast transcript and really put it into book formatting. And that saves you a lot of time, but also it saves you the trouble of like staring at the blank piece of paper and being like, oh my gosh, I have to write this book. And that's so daunting. It's like, it's less daunting when you have a foundation to start from. And the second piece of advice I have is that once you write the book and the book is out in the world, the marathon is just beginning, because I see so many authors write a book, they do the launch, and then they never talk about the book again. It's like it doesn't exist, and then it goes and it dies in the basement of Amazon because they don't have a like promotional or marketing plan behind the book for the long haul. And they're not, and I think we fall into this trap of like, oh, well, my audience knows I have a book, so they'll just go get it. So I don't need to talk about it anymore. And I will never forget, I remember the Three-Word Rebellion had been out for about 6 months, and I was having a conversation with a friend I hadn't seen in a while. And she was like, oh, you have a new book? I'm like, we're connected on social media. I feel like I talk about this book all the time. She had no idea, right? Like none whatsoever. So when you write a book, you are going to be promoting that book for several years to come, or 10 years to come. It really doesn't matter, especially if your ideas are evergreen. So I think that's the big thing. It's like you're just starting the marathon when that book is done and published.
Very well said again, Michelle. Many times when you want to purchase something, you don't really buy it right away. You wait a little bit and you see that image over and over and over again. And then eventually you make the purchase. This is no different. How can people find your book, Michelle, and all things Michelle?
So my website is drmichellemazur.com, and you can also go to 3wrbook.com, and that will take you to all the places that you could buy it. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Depository, so you can find it in all of those places.
Thank you for sharing all that, Michelle, and thank you for an amazing episode. For everyone viewing, thank you for your support on another show, and we will see you next week for an amazing testimonial on Writing with Authors.